off by telling us your name and talking about where you're currently living?
Sure. My name is Elisabeth and I live in Fairfax, Virginia right now.
Great. And what about your experience in Fairfax made you want to reach out to us for this interview?
So I'm originally from a small town in Western Pennsylvania, and then I moved around various areas on like the East Coast to go to grad school and work and everything. And I moved to Fairfax about 5 years ago, and it's by far like the biggest area that I've ever lived in. And why I wanted to reach out to Best Places was one, like several years ago, I came across the website and started doing the little quizzes to try to figure out like where do I want to move to next and things like that. And I've always followed the site. And so whenever I heard about these like interviews that people were doing about where they live, I decided, hey, why not? Like I'll share my input on Fairfax. So why I reached out was that I love where I live, but I wish that I had known more about it before I moved here. So that's why.
Nice, that makes sense. In that vein, what are some things about Fairfax that you really like?
One thing I really like is, it's a DC suburb. So we're only about like 15 to 20 miles like outside of the city. And I like it because not only does it have close proximity to DC and like all it has to offer, but Fairfax is also really strategically located in the United States because you're pretty much on the middle part of the country on the East Coast. So you pretty much are in a day's drive of like New York City, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Charlotte, like everything. And then we have several large airports that can get you to anywhere in the world. So there's a lot of access from where I'm at. And then we're also in close proximity to the beach. So it's like 2 hours to the beach, an hour to the mountains. So you're good geographically for any type of activity that you'd want to do or any type of scenery you'd want to do. And basically, like there is nothing that I can dream of or think of that like Fairfax County doesn't have in terms of like restaurants, stores, things I want to do, any kind of services. Like it's literally, as far as amenities go, it's the best place I've ever lived.
Nice, excellent. On the other side of that, are there things about Fairfax that you wish were different or that you could live without?
I do very much. So one thing is traffic. Traffic is insane. It's getting back to like pre-pandemic traffic at this point, but anywhere you wanted to go, you have to program at least 30 minutes of extra time. So even if you're like, I'm going to go 10 minutes down the road to the store, it's like, no, go 45 minutes before when you wanted to go, because the traffic is just unexpected. And yeah, traffic is not good. You expect to get somewhere in 10 minutes and you take an hour. So traffic is not good. Let's see, I wrote down, also cost of living and cost of housing. So cost of housing is insane. The place that I live now, I live in a 1-bedroom apartment, and this is the first out of 4 places that I've lived in Fairfax. This is the first place where I have not had a roommate or multiple roommates, just because the cost of living is crazy here. For what you would get a small bedroom, not even like a 1-bedroom apartment, but a bedroom in an apartment. In other areas of the country, you can rent a 2-bedroom house for what you would pay. So the cost of living is crazy. So if you want to live by yourself, you better plan to have a really high paying job or have a lot of savings, or else you're going to have multiple roommates in most cases. And then another one is, in this area, it's pretty transient as far as people coming in and out. So whether they work for the government or the military or things like that. So a lot of friends that I make, they're usually like on their way out. Like, I'm only here 1 more year because my husband's in the military, or, I'm done working here because of the cost of living. I'm going to move back home. So it's been kind of challenging to make friends that are going to stick around because it's really a transient area.
Mm-hmm. With all that in mind, the good and the bad, would you recommend someone else move to Fairfax?
I would. And like, I am actually trying to like coax people to come like move down here, because I don't, I don't intend to leave anytime soon. Like I'm getting married at the end of this year, and so we're thinking about should we stay here, should we move elsewhere, just for all the factors, both good and bad, that I've discussed. So I would recommend someone come here, literally just because there's so much to do and anything you could ever want is here. Um, on the flip side, like if you're going to move here, do some investigation about what kind of job would you do, how much money would you make with that, how much housing can you afford, and things like that. So I definitely recommend it, but with some like prep work.
Great. Yeah. So you mentioned that you moved from a small town to Fairfax.
Mhm.
Have you lived anywhere else?
I have. So I grew up in a small town in Western Pennsylvania. Our like my high school had like 400 people in it. So really, really tiny. I was there all throughout like school and college, and then I went to grad school in Central New York. So I also lived in a small town up there as well for about 5 years while I was going to grad school and working. And then I moved down to Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is an hour south of where I am right now. And I lived there for about 5 years, and then I moved up here to Fairfax, and I've been here for about 5 years or so. So I've gradually, as my life has gone on, I've gone on to like bigger areas.
Nice. What was your biggest move, do you think, among all that, like in terms of culture shock or just in terms of distance?
Um, Biggest move in terms of distance was definitely from Central New York. Like I was in a small town called Cazenovia, which is about a suburb of Syracuse, and that was really tiny. And I moved 8 hours, an 8 hour drive from Cazenovia to Fredericksburg, which is where I moved. So that was, I mean, Fredericksburg is a bigger town than where I'd lived previously, but it's definitely smaller than Fairfax, where I'm at right now. And it wasn't so much culture shock because Fredericksburg is a very small town feel, even though it's spread out. And then as far as culture shock, I would definitely say moving up here to Fairfax. And even from Fredericksburg to Fairfax, it's an hour distance. But somewhere on 95 in between Fredericksburg and Fairfax, you start getting into like the traffic of the DC area. And then it starts to be like city. So it's definitely slower pace down in Fredericksburg compared to Fairfax. So I bet the biggest culture difference would be between those two cities.
Hmm, interesting. And do you have any advice or anything for people who might be making a similar move sometime soon?
Sure. So any type of move, like I've worked with college students for most of my career. And so I always give them advice whenever they're like graduating and leaving and trying to decide where they want to go. And it is definitely go visit where you want to go, and not just as a tourist. Like, sure, it's fine to go as a tourist and do like sightseeing and touristy things, but try to stay there for like a week or a long weekend or something and envision you being there. So like I said before, what kind of job would you get? How much would it pay? What kind of housing could you afford? Where would you go shopping? If you have like pets, can you find a veterinarian that you like? Or if you have specialty stores or things you need, does the new area that you want to move to offer that? And try to imagine yourself living there. Also, like look at like the newspapers. A lot of stores have those little like free magazines and things that say like what's going on regionally. Pick those up, look at them, and see, is there anything like what I fit in here in terms of hobby and lifestyle and things like that. Like I think back whenever I was moving up to well, I chose to stay in the area that I graduated grad school at, but there really was not a lot to offer like a young professional at the time. That was like 10 years ago. And I'm like, literally everyone around here has families, and there's no single people. There's no one to hang out with. And so after grad school, I should have just like gone. But I also didn't, I just went there for grad school, and then I got a job, and I didn't think about, is there anything for me to do here that I would like that fits my hobbies and interests and things like that. So definitely try to get a feel for it and see if your lifestyle and your interests align with living in that place.
Great. Yeah. That's really good advice. Thanks for sharing. In all of this moving that you have done, is there anything that stands out particularly about the experience that was extremely negative or extremely positive that you may want to avoid in the future or make sure to do again if you move in the future?
Sorry, we have a visitor.
It's okay.
So what I would do, whenever I moved from New York to Virginia, I was like moving by myself. Like my family is back in Pennsylvania and everything, and I got one of those like U-Haul pod things where you can pack it up and then they'll take it away and ship it to your destination, and then you arrive there and then it arrives. I would totally do something like that again. Like I know U-Haul does it and there's other companies that do that. I would definitely do that. Let's see, what else would I do again? Definitely do the pod thing. Definitely before you move anywhere, try to declutter and get rid of anything that you don't want to bring into your new house or your new life. Like figure out, does this serve me anymore? If not, like sell it, toss it, donate it, whatever. And just try to bring stuff that will serve your new life and your new place rather than hauling around stuff. Like for the longest time, I hauled around so much so much dumb stuff that I was like, oh, I'll use this, I'll use it. And most of it was like craft supplies and things. So I'm like, I like to make cards and scrapbook. And I'm just like, why did I just not give this away when I was in New York and then get new stuff when I arrived in Virginia? So try to minimize what you have to haul around, for one thing.
Good to know. Well, that was basically all my questions for today. It was great talking with you. Before we sign off, do you have anything else that you want to share? Um, Final parting thoughts.
Final parting thoughts. As we're contemplating, like my fiance and I are contemplating moving to other areas of the country and everything, and we're processing like what makes Fairfax great and why we like living here versus other parts of the country. And he's lived in other parts of the country, and it really is essentially what you make of it. Like you make your own fun, essentially, where you end up. And so just make sure that you have an open mind. If you're choosing to go somewhere where you really want to go, that's great. But if you end up in some place where you're like, oh, I really didn't want to be here, ultimately you choose to make your own fun, and there are things to do. So just keep that in mind. So whenever I was living in like small town New York, you found things to do, and it was a relatively like happy existence. Then you move to like bigger places and you're like, wow, there's so many things the small town didn't have that the big town has now. But ultimately you make it what it is. So
Great. That's wonderful. That's a lovely sentiment. Well, it was great chatting with you today, Liz. It
all right,
was
you too.
great to get to know you. We can sign off now.